story and I'll come back. So anyway, I found my way after a series of increasingly embarrassing incidents and increasingly difficult exchanges with the woman of my life. I found myself at AA for the first time. And the meeting I ended up in, that was my home group, was in some respects really kind of delightfully idiosyncratic and really strange and really, really interesting in ways that I liked a lot. And there were people there that I liked a lot, some of whom I'm still in touch with, and I'm still friendly with, and I'm still really glad to have in my life. But I struggled, I realized pretty early on that I did not quite get it. I wanted some of what these people had. They were not drinking and they seemed really, really happy. And I definitely wanted that. That was something that I remember some multiple references in the big book to wanting what we have. I wanted that part of what they had, but the way they got it, I couldn't get my head around it. It was less the God thing. And this isn't, I was raised, unlike some people who come to secular recovery and who credit secular recovery with keeping them going, like I do, I don't have a lot of religious baggage. I don't have negative childhood experiences with religion. I was raised essentially godless. I was raised godless. I was raised by a slightly snarky Dawkins-esque atheist father and an ex-Christian, quietly, non-specifically theist mom in a house without any religious tradition. So it wasn't that the God language offended me or brought up opened old wounds. It was that I simply couldn't relate. It meant nothing to me. And people were really, really into it. Even the former homeless gutter punk with the tattoos all over his face was really into getting on his knees and praying to God God. And that was definitely something I didn't get. I definitely felt apart from that in ways that were alienating from the beginning, but I can't pretend that was the single biggest factor. The entire approach that these folks had, the love that they had for a very rigid, very ritualized, very, very tightly structured meeting was evident. They really loved it. They were really, not only were they happy and sober, they were happy and sober, and they loved this very tight system that they were really ardent participants in. I mean, I can still recite how it works. I can still recite the 9-step promises. I haven't opened the big book in a lot of years, but I can still, it's deeply ingrained in me because of the way that it was done in these meetings. And I didn't feel it. And I didn't think I wanted that aspect of what they had. I wanted parts of what they had, but I didn't want all of it. And I sort of expressed some doubts about this to some friends, and they were like, well, fake it till you make it. So I sort of faked it. For a year of my life, I did my best. I had a sponsor and I did step work, and I was very active, as active as I could be in these meetings. I was doing the best I could to what I thought would be faking it until I made it. And ultimately, unfortunately, I didn't make it. After about a year, just over a year in total, I gradually decided that I wasn't a real alcoholic. I knew I wasn't like these people because they loved God, and they were really into the structure, and they really liked reciting out of the big book, and they really believed in this very tight way to do this. It's laid out in 12 steps in order, and that's the only way. They really believed in it in a devout way that I never ended up feeling. It didn't help also that my sponsor, when I told him quite explicitly, fairly early on, that I was an atheist, I did not and could not believe, he said, well, not yet. And that was it. He just brushed it off. He was a real believer in the we agnostics aspect of AA. So I knew I wasn't quite like these people, but I managed to convince myself that not only was I was so unlike these people that I wasn't even a real alcoholic. And so after more than a year in total, but a year of actively participating in that particular program in whatever fake way I was doing it, I can't say that I relapsed, because that sounds almost involuntary. I chose to walk away. I decided, nope, I'm not an alcoholic. I proved it by not drinking for a year. Of course I'm not a real alcoholic. A real alcoholic can't not drink for a year. I really went to great mental gymnastics lengths to decide that it was okay to do what I did, and what ultimately proved to be an incredibly bad idea. I proved to be the textbook progressive alcoholic, and my drinking, once I gave myself permission, I faked it, being a gentleman with it for, must have been a couple of months, but it gradually got worse and worse until once again, I was drinking medicinally and increasingly drinking secretly and drinking just destructively. And finally, I hit a wall. I realized, not literally, thank God, but, or thank whatever, but I reached a point where I knew once again that it had to be over and I had to make a change. And I did. And I did that, thankfully, by finding a secular way. I lean on a few of my old friends from the old days, and I've leaned on now increasingly heavily on a network of people around the world that I've been lucky to find in secular AA rooms for Zoom. But there's basically, I think there's 4 differences between what I did before and what I'm doing now and what I think the difference is. And the first one is, frankly, the first step. It wasn't that I wasn't like those people. It was that I never admitted that I was like those people. Even though I worked at some facsimile of sobriety for a good year, I never really admitted that I did step work, and I never really admitted honestly that I had a problem. The second thing that I realized I had to do was that I had to do it for myself, because I think on some levels I projected the impetus for changing my life on other people, on my wife, on my family, on those around me. I have to do it for them. They want me to do it. They're making me do it. I created these falsehoods in my head that allowed me to make bad choices, that gave me excuses to do bad things. And what I've done now is realize that, yes, I want to do it for my wife, but not because she's making me do it, but because I want to be the me that I think she deserves, and that, you know, I want to be the person that belongs in this place. And it's not just about her. It's almost nothing to do with her. It's about me and making sure that I can keep going in a really honest way. And again, it's about honesty. The other thing that I do now that I didn't do before, I heard a lot about making your sobriety first, keeping it the first thing in your life. And I wasn't always able to do that my first time around. And now that I've come to the conclusion that for me, it isn't always necessarily first, but it is always. This is something that I've got to acknowledge and be an active participant in every day of my life. I connect to sobriety, and I connect to self-improvement in ways, including those laid out in the steps, on a daily basis, because I have to, and because it's got to be in there for me. I can't look past it. I can't pretend it's sort of a hobby or a side thing I do. And the last thing that I think I really had to learn, that I was not open to learning before, is that for me, I have to use every tool I've got in my personal toolbox. And that's not just meetings. That's not just AA. That's not just anything resembling a 12-step program. For me, therapy is really essential. And talking to people outside of the fellowship, in addition to people in the fellowship, to really ground myself and be aware of who I am and what I'm doing on a daily basis is really, really essential. And I couldn't have done this without the fellowship, but I also couldn't have done this without my shrink and without antidepressant medication. And I encountered some hostilities to that in my first home group. I met people who really felt like psychiatry was the enemy of recovery on some level. And that may be a little strong, but I got that impression from people, and it was weird to me, because it was psychiatry that had led me in part to attempt an AA recovery. But recognizing that not drinking is not going to solve all my problems, period. Not drinking in the fellowship with other people who are also committing to not drinking is not going to solve all my problems. It's definitely going to make it easier for me to see my problems and to address them and to beat them up one day at a time, one afternoon at a time. But for me, at least, I learned that I need to use a lot of different resources at the same time toward the goal of remembering that this is a problem that I can't let sneak up on me. It's one I can't pretend doesn't exist, and I can't pretend that it's anybody's problem but mine. It's my problem first, and everybody else's problem because it's my problem, perhaps. But ultimately, I got to fix it for me. And that's what I make an effort to do now. And I do that through the fellowship. I do that through honesty. I do that through serious digging with my therapist and trying to really be mindful of what's going on with me emotionally, what I'm doing, what I'm trying to do, and just engaging with my life in what is, to use a cliche, a mindful way. And that mindfulness, it gets bounced around so much, but so much of what is most important to my recovery, including the rigorous honesty and the daily inventory and the daily gratitudes and the stuff that I got from AA and that I cherish about AA, it all comes back upon really being aware of where I am right now and being honest about it. And that's something that I was never willing to do before. And it's something that I've been willing to do ever since I decided that I really did have a problem. And I'm glad to be able to do it. You know, I don't pretend that every day feels good. And I don't pretend that AA is the only thing that is helping me. But it is a thing that's helping me. And it's a thing for which I will always be grateful. Yeah. Anyway, I should shut up because I've been going on too long. But the last thing I did want to say is that I mentioned not feeling like I was a part of the first group when I first tried. And I really did. I maybe made an effort, whether subconscious or consciously, I can't be sure, but I think I almost made an effort to alienate myself from them, even though I felt alien naturally, but I think I went out of my way to emphasize that so I could decide that I could quit. But I wanted to say that since I've come back to secular recovery, I've actually made a point of going back and revisiting my old home group from which I felt sometimes so little in common. I felt really different from those guys. And one of the things that I'm actually really happy about is now that I've really acknowledged in a sincere and honest way that this is a problem that I can't fake isn't there, I really feel a sincere kinship with them. Even when I don't actually agree with them, I no longer feel alien in a way that I once did. I'm not going to work the same program they do, and I shouldn't. And their program is keeping them moving forward and saving their lives, and mine is doing mine. And I'm really glad to actually know them again and to realize that, like it or not, we really do have the same problem. And I'm glad to be able to admit that, and I'm glad to be able to feel that about these people. Anyway, that was kind of all over the place, but I should shut up because I think that you all have wonderful things to say too. I guess what I would, I don't know if you want me to suggest a topic, but I think things that are on my mind are maybe how do you go about building a comprehensive toolbox? You know, what else, how does AA or whatever form secular recovery takes in your life, how does it fit into other things in your personal recovery? Because for me, it's an essential element, but I realize it can't ever be the only element. And I think that they make one another stronger. So I'd love to hear, if anybody, you can talk about whatever you want to, but if anybody would like to look for a theme, I think my theme is, what else, what tools do we have in our various toolboxes, and how do we like them to work together? I'm glad to be here. Again, I'm grateful to Robert for asking me. This is the first time I ever did something like this, but I'm glad to be sober. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.